Welcome to the Stories Told podcast. This is episode 118, Fundamental Interconnectedness. This is the Stories Told podcast. Two authors talking about stories in movies, TV, and of course, books.
I'm Michael Grayford. I write action-adventure stories in fantasy and sci-fi worlds, sometimes for younger readers and sometimes for adults. And I try to always inject at least a little bit of humor.
And I am author E.W. Barnes, and I write action-adventure, time travel novels, and space opera science fiction. Thousands of years, thousands of worlds. But be forewarned, beyond here, there will be spoilers. Are you ready for the adventure? Let's begin. Welcome back to the Stories Told podcast. I'm author E.W. Barnes, and with me is author Michael Grayford. And today we're talking about the story told in Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency by Douglas Adams. How you doing today, Mike?
I'm doing fantastic.
And what's new in your writing world?
Not much new in my writing world. I've been dealing with real world stuff, not imaginary world stuff. So I haven't hit
that happens.
Just, writing down some ideas here and there, but not much, honestly. I hope you're doing better with your writing world.
I've been editing like crazy. I have been, like we talked about last time, going through this third book in the Empyrean Guard series and making sure that all the little seeds that I planted for threads that I want to weave into the story are being woven into the story, right? So I go through each chapter and I make a note. And it's kind of funny. I was laughing at myself because I'm writing this science fiction story with lots of science fiction-y stuff while handwriting notes on a pad of paper with a pen. Kind of funny. Maybe ironic even that I'm working on science fiction with my analog tools. It just works better for me to handwrite everything out and make sure, don't forget this, don't forget this.
Yeah, whatever works.
Exactly. So what interesting stories have you come across lately in books, movies, and television?
Not too much. I'm still watching that Bosch show about the detective guy. There were I think there were 7 seasons, and then the pandemic kind of stalled it or something. And then they started a new series called Bosch Legacy. So now it's 3 seasons into that. So I'm about caught up on that.
Good.
I don't know if they're still going to be making it or not. So I watched that, and then I watched 28 Days Later, because the third movie in that series, 28 Years Later, is coming out. So I figured I would rewatch the first 2 to remind myself what's going on. And I think this is one of the first movies where they made zombies that were fast and actually terrifying. So that's very, very aggressive. Not really zombies, more like a virus kind of thing, but same style thing. So anyway, I rewatched that, and then I don't know if I can actually see the movie that's out now in the theaters, because the theater in my town just closed down, so I'm not sure if there's another one that'll have it.
Oh dear.
Yeah. What about you? Any cool movies, shows, books, stories?
I finished watching the last episode of The Librarians, the 2014 series. It was a lot of fun. I think it really came into its own, even though it's very light, good, beach watching television. It did add some complexity and some story arc and some character development that I thought was enjoyable. And then I'm still reading, it's the second book in the Stormlight Archive. Still reading that. This is the second or third time I've read it. I am enjoying it. I do have the latest book sitting on my to-be-read pile, so I'm just going through the books that I've read previously so that I can remind myself what happened before I get into the latest book that's been released.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. So are you ready to talk about Dirk Gently?
Yeah, let's get into it.
Today we're talking about the story told in the novel Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency by Douglas Adams. And usually I read the back of the book to give the summary, but this one just has wonderful accolades for Douglas Adams. So I'm going to read the overview that's available on Google when you type in Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency, the novel, not the television series. Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency is a humorous detective novel by English writer Douglas Adams, published in 1987. It is described by the author on its cover as a thumping good detective, ghost, horror, whodunit, time travel, romantic, musical, comedy, epic. Did you enjoy this novel?
Yeah, I did. I like Douglas Adams' quirky style. I hadn't read anything by him in a long time. So it was kind of fun going back and reading something of his. I was a little worried that it wouldn't hold up for me, but it did. I had a lot of fun reading it. I didn't read it. I listened to it on audiobook, but still, it came across really well. He read his own audiobook. So,
oh, how fun.
Yeah. So, and he has a good voice and a good style of reading. So I think it worked well. This is one of those stories that has a very complicated plot, and at first is baffling about what's going on, but somehow wraps things together by the end of the story. I like stories like that. It's more, I guess you would say it's more plot-based than character-based, which I think a lot of his writing is, and tends to be more common for mystery-style stories, which I guess at the core, that's what this is. The detective agency is in the name. And, you've got aliens, ghosts, robots, and time travel all in one story. So that's fun. And I love how the main character, Dirk Gently, he's actually a good detective. He puts together these seemingly random, odd events, and he's able to follow strange occurrences because they must be related somehow, right? In his world. He somehow... there's something about this guy where either he's very intuitive or he causes these weird things to happen around him or something. But he's actually a good detective. He's good at finding these little threads of weirdness and realizing that they're connected and figuring out how they are. So it's kind of satisfying for me anyway, seeing how he solves the case. And it's kind of amusing because solving this case actually... he saves humanity, even though there was really no inkling that humans were even at risk for most of this book. So it's kind of like you don't even know the stakes of the story until the end, which is pretty funny. Yeah, I love the way that Adams weaves together seemingly unrelated things, even the sofa being stuck halfway up the stairs. It feels like Adams was just started writing this when he was drunk and then said, okay, now how can I put all this together into a story that makes sense? And it works. It eventually does come together. It's not like some TV shows where it starts off and all these strange things happens and then it just kind of ends and you're left wondering what was the point of all that. This actually connects and makes sense. So I thought that was a lot of fun. The TV show, the American TV show anyway, if I remember right, is a different story, but it is very much like this book in tone. So if people are wondering, is the show the same as the book? I don't think so. It's similar feeling, but if I remember right, the story is different. But anyway, yeah, I like this. I think there's a lot of fun here. A lot of it relies on his quirky style of writing, and I think for me it still worked pretty well. What about you?
I enjoyed the layers, and it's funny coincidentally, because this is what I'm working on in my story right now, is just making sure there's a good weaving of the layers, and Douglas Adams does this brilliantly and does it in a way that you don't even realize he's doing it. It's not overt. It's a very subtle and in a lot of ways kind of a genius way of doing it. And I actually highlighted a passage that I wanted to read here. And I'm going to go ahead and read this out loud. It's just a paragraph. It's from early on in the story. And we have two people who are arriving at a dinner at a college. They were late and shook off their coats hurriedly. This was complicated for the older man by the necessity first of taking off his professorial gown, and then of putting it back on again once his coat was off, then of stuffing his hat in his coat pocket, then of wondering where he'd put his scarf, and then of realizing that he hadn't brought it, then of fishing in his coat pocket for his handkerchief, then of fishing in his other coat pocket for his spectacles, and finally of finding them quite unexpectedly wrapped in his scarf, which it turned out he had brought after all, but hadn't been wearing, despite the damp and bitter wind blowing in like a witch's breath from across the fens. Now, I tabbed that because I thought it was funny and it was brilliantly written because you could totally see this person. And I've done this myself. Okay, where is this? Okay, where is this? Okay, where is this? Okay, this. Oh, wait, it's on my head, right? It was so beautifully done. And then as it turned out, this was actually part of the story.
Yes.
Which was just so unbelievably brilliant. And the other thing that I wrote here is that later in the story, we follow this gentleman back to his apartment where he does this exact same thing again, but instead of just reiterating what he's doing, Douglas Adams just calls it going through the palaver again, which I thought was also brilliant, right? And that's like 2/3 of the way of the story. And then almost to the end of the story, we learn that this whole thing with the hat is actually part of the story. Brilliant. And it's subtle and it serves so many purposes here. It describes this man and his sort of, okay, where can I find? I mean, you can totally see it. You're getting a picture of his character. You're getting a picture of the event. You're getting a picture of Douglas Adams' really funny, subtle, humorous writing. And you're getting something that's important to the story, all in this one paragraph.
And you're getting some description of the setting, too.
Yes. Brilliantly, brilliantly done. The other thing that I wanted to add to what you said is that, Douglas Adams calls this a detective story, a ghost story, a horror story, a whodunit, a time travel, a romantic, musical. With the romance is very thin. I don't want to say thin, but very light. It's very...
Yeah.
It's a very, very light subplot. Musical comedy, epic. But the other thing is that there's also a paranormal element because there's this question of whether Dirk Gently is a vampire or has telepathic skills.
Yeah, there's definitely something going on. I'm not sure what it is. Is it telepathy? Is because the whole thing with him sort of creating a scam to help people out with their college exams and then having the right answer for every exam. Like, what is that? Is he like tying into the future? Does he have some kind of clairvoyance? Like there's something there. I don't know exactly how to define it.
These are some of the things we like in this story. Is there anything that you might have changed as a writer?
There's so much interweaving here. It's hard to pull at one thread without unraveling the story. And I think he just nails the tone and the humor. I mean, you're either going to like his style of writing or you're not. For me, I love it. I think it's great. It's very clever, very witty, zany at times, and silly, but it's fun. For me, I think the thing that maybe could be improved is something I've noticed with his other stories. His stories tend to be more about the plot and the events and the tone and style, more so than the character development. I think he could make us care about the characters a bit more. Or as they are, they're mostly just props for the plot and the humor. And I think they work well for that, but I would like to care a little bit, at least about main character or two, more depth to those characters. That would be that's the main thing that I felt like I wanted a little bit more from him. What about you?
There was only a couple of things. One was that we didn't meet our title character until almost halfway in through the book. So for that, I was expecting to learn more about Dirk Gently's holistic detective agency way, way earlier on. And we get a mention of Dirk Gently, or Slod, very early on in the book, but then we don't actually meet him until about halfway through the story. And then shortly after that, the threat to our main character, who is a gentleman named Richard, ends. There's a death, and that he may or may not be suspected in the death. And then shortly after we meet Dirk Gently, then that's resolved. So then we don't have the tension that goes with this character continuing forward in the story. And then after that, we're kind of like, oh, now we have to solve the mystery of what actually happened. And I think this goes to your point of how we're not really tied into the characters that much. The only thing that was tying us into Richard was he, in danger of being suspected of this murder?
Yeah.
And once that's over, we're kind of cut loose from these characters. And so I would have liked to have been kept a little bit more tied into these characters, because then the next thing I was hoping for was, okay, we got cut loose from Richard. Does Gordon Way get saved by use of the time travel device? That's what I wanted. And so I was hooked for that, hoping for that. And then that didn't happen. And so I was once again cut loose from the character. And by that point, I was kind of like, okay, I'm not really that invested in these people anymore. And I'm certainly not invested in Dirk Gently because I didn't get to know him until halfway into the story. So I think it kind of ties back into what you were saying about hooking us into the characters just a little bit more in order to keep us going.
Yeah. I think those are definitely related. Because I had the same, like, now you're mentioning like the specific, like, maybe those things would help. And if you'd given us more to latch onto with these characters, I think you're right. It would have helped carry through the story a little bit more, as opposed to it just being an entertaining thing.
And it was entertaining. There was absolutely no doubt about that. And for me, I would have liked that because we had, like in Hitchhiker's Guide, we had the ordinary person in a wacky situation with a wacky guide.
Yes.
And I think in this particular situation, it would have been best to maybe not have the murder solved so quickly, or instead of, having the murder being solved, or I should say not solved, because it wasn't solved until much later in the story. But instead of having our potential suspect being let off the hook, switching gears and saying, okay, we're going to actually stop the murder. I think doing that would have continued with the wackiness of the situation, but continued with our being engaged.
That's a good idea. Yeah, I think that would work.
So let's talk about themes. Did you find any themes in this novel?
This was a tough one because it's kind of all over the place, and because it's not really a character-driven story so much. Usually you find themes in like what the character goes through, but a lot of mysteries are kind of this way. A lot of mystery stories, especially like serial TV shows where it's a mystery. The theme is basically crime doesn't pay, or something simple like that. Because it's typically not about the character development, it's about solving a crime. So maybe it's similar in that way. What I came up with was keeping your mind open to outlandish possibilities might take you to the truth. Something like that. Kind of
it's almost verbatim what I have.
The quirky detective aspect of it.
But I had keeping your mind open to the impossible.
It's it. There you go.
I think that really works because everything about this is kind of impossible, right? Everything that happens is impossible.
Yeah.
And so in order for the story to work, you got to keep your mind open for the impossible. So I think we kind of hit on the big one. So let's talk about what you take away from Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency as a writer.
For me, it's about playing with expectations and twisting things, right? Like here it's keeping your mind open to the impossible, right? To these outlandish possibilities that are that are out there. So he plays with a lot of that stuff. There's a sofa stuck on a stairway that couldn't have gotten there because it can't go up or it can't go down physically. Like, how is that possible, right? So playing with these kind of things is a lot of fun. He does it so well. And in particular with the implementation of humor, right? Even just playing with how sentences are structured. You're expecting this phrase to come up next in the sentence, and no, that phrase comes up first, and then something weird comes after it, right? He does a lot of that, which is just very fun to read. So for me, that's my big takeaway, is just playing with expectations. What about you?
That's good. That's a very good one. And I can see where that landed with you because you do like to include humor in your stories. That's a very important component to your story. So looking at how that humor is woven in to this story, I can see where that really landed with you. Yeah. For me, it was, like I was talking about earlier, this multi-use of the plot threading, right? There's so many little pieces that are woven into the story that are part of the humor, part of the world building in this story that also serve multiple functions. There's an elegance to that and a brilliance to that I admire, and I would love to be able to do that in my stories too.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you for joining us as we talked about Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency by Douglas Adams. A huge thanks to our Patreon supporters and all our listeners. Your support, noticed through every like and every share, means the world to us. If you enjoyed what we talked about today, here's some further readings that you can explore. Mike's Tales of Zara series was inspired by the Arabian mythology of 1001 Nights. Start with the Golden Scare of Babalahar, an enchanting quest that will captivate readers who love magic, wonder, and strong heroines, in a story told with plenty of heart and a generous dash of humor. All links are in the show notes if you're curious to explore more. The Stories Told podcast is now on all major platforms. Please like, subscribe, or follow to help us reach more story lovers like you. For book, TV, and movie suggestions, drop a note on our YouTube channel, and that link is in the show notes as well. You can find Michael Grayford at michaelgrayford.com and E.W. Barnes at 1000years.com. Join us next time as we share the first of 4 Ultra podcasts, combining podcast episode into deep dives for Andor, Loki, Avatar: The Last Airbender, and Doctor Who. Thanks so much, Mike. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, this was great. Thank you.
And we'll see you next time on the Stories Told podcast.